Guys, biceps training has to be an area which a lot of people are very, very confused about. The reason they're confused is because no matter what they do, the biceps don't develop at the rate that the rest of the body does. And you'll try workout after workout, program after program, and they will struggle to develop. Now, we're not all created the same. That's the first thing, okay? And with most people, due to structural imbalances, muscle weaknesses, you're gonna find that your ability to lock yourself down and stay stable and place tension on the target muscle, which is the biceps, very, very difficult. Now, some people might find it very, very easy and forever feel their biceps when they train. But for the people that struggle to build their biceps, they might get to the end of a biceps workout and feel it more in their elbow joints, they'll feel it more in the delts, especially up where the origins of the biceps are, and they'll feel it less in the muscle belly. You know, having taught so many people for many, many years now, there's so many commonalities with the people that do not feel their biceps. So a lot of people take inspiration for people that have big biceps, and that's very right. But it's not necessarily going to help you because they don't know really what made their biceps big. They know the exercises, but they don't necessarily know structurally what would limit somebody else from growing their biceps. Now, having been somebody that's had very big shoulder injuries over the years, I never really associated my shoulder injuries with an inability to grow my biceps. And over years and years of kind of doing biceps exercises and feeling my tendons and just not seeing the development, a few years ago now, I really started to get some real good development in certain areas of my biceps, and then I started to apply what I knew into developing the long head and the short head of the biceps to give me that more fuller look. And it wasn't until last year that I really nailed down exactly what I need to do. Now, one of the big problems for me, having had structural problems with my shoulders for many years, is the fact that I struggle with a lot of stability. And that's from benching, I struggle with stability, any shoulder exercises I struggle with stability, but it wasn't until I actually started to make my shoulders a lot more stable that certain muscle groups started to improve. So what happens with biceps? Well, the number one thing that happens with biceps, I'll come this way, is when most people curl, this is the movement that we want. The biceps, basically you're going to recruit them by flexing and extending the elbow joint, okay? Now, through this range of movement, you're going to impact the maximal shortening of the biceps and maximal lengthening of the biceps. Now, what happens if when you curl, the first part of the recruitment comes from here? You're going to get elevation. And you're then going to start the exercise from either flexing the shoulder joint or literally just pulling up against the load. So you get it to here, you lift, you sit it back, and then you drop it onto here. There are common things that people do when they do biceps curls. They probably wouldn't know what they're looking for. So when you do a curl, you should be able to literally lock down and maintain stability in your shoulders. And most people, when they do biceps, can't. So my big tip for you when it comes to biceps training is forget a lot of the standing exercises to start with. That's number one. Forget trying to shift a lot of load, because look at the size of these compared to, say, my legs, compared to my lats, compared to my chest, or even your own. They're small muscle groups. And in order for you to make them grow and to stimulate them, they need to be taught how to work in isolation. And if your delts, if your shoulder structure is unstable or your delts are more dominant, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up moving from here and taking a large percentage of the load off the biceps. So imagine 30% of the movement coming from your biceps and the rest coming from surrounding muscle groups is going to take a long, long time to grow your biceps. So in order to improve them, we need to get you locked down. Now, moving on to something a little bit more practical. I'll give you the example. Now, two different exercises with the preacher curl, but if you get somebody on a preacher curl, number one thing that you see, as it's coming down, as the muscle's under tension and it gets hard, you lift up, creating a big joint from here, okay? And then you'll drop your bicep down and then you'll curl from here. So what we've got, we're losing some tension, We're losing biceps, so we're placing a lot of tension on the forearms and the elbow joint, and we're dropping back with momentum, missing out the full lengthening range, and then using momentum to get up to the mid-range. So what we've got there is like 20%, 30% of the movement where the biceps are under tension, and then the rest of the movement where other joints are under tension and a lot of other stuff stabilizing. So with most people, the load's going to be too heavy, because if you cannot lock in and extend your bicep and recruit from the bicep, driving down into the bench through the full range, getting a peak contraction, lengthen and contraction, you have no place lifting more weight. And as humbling as it is for most people, lifting with lighter weights is actually the way to go, because the strength of the actual biceps is relative to what you're able to control. And if you cannot control that muscle group, it's not that you have no place doing it, it's you're not going to get the same level of results. So I will tell you to drop your weights. I will tell you to find exercises such as the preacher bench and lock yourself in, because ultimately that is the way that you're going to improve. Now take the preacher curl away from there, right? Let's look at the standing curl. For most people, the shoulder flexion and extension is going to become a big issue. Elevation is going to become a big issue to try and get the exercise done. And then lumbar is going to be the next thing that's going to come in. So if you think about this, it comes from the shoulder, the hips, and you lean. And all through that type of movement, there's a lot of tension coming off the biceps. Now, think about locking down, lock the scapula in. If you're very unstable, no matter what you do, something's going to happen from here. So how do you actually get a mid-range exercise being able to lock down a lot more? I'll show you in a second. So what I've done, guys, I've gone from standing bicep curls to seated. Now, with this seat height, you might want to lower it a little bit. We're at the bottom anyway. So what I'm going to want to do with this is, if you've got very little stability, you can drive backwards into the bench. So what will happen here is, by being able to drive back into the bench, I'm giving myself some form of stability. So I'm pushing back into the bench. So I've now got my scapula a lot more stable. I've got tension on my biceps. If I'm here, I've got no tension. So I'm placing tension on my biceps, and then I'm driving into the bench, and now I'm contracting. Now, believe it or not, this exercise, in terms of actually locking onto the biceps, is so much harder than standing, because standing, remember, as soon as I curl, I'm going to rotate through the shoulder. When I'm locking into the back here, you're going to place full tension on the bicep from start to finish. So we've looked at like a preacher bench. We're going to work from a fixed position for that mid-range. Then I'm going to take you over to the cables now. I'm going to show you another variation for singles that you can do on the cable, especially for that fully shortened head. So guys, when we actually talk about getting the biceps in its shortened position, a lot of people think that it's like way up here, over here. In order for you to get it, the biceps in this fully shortened position, you actually need to get to about here, okay? Now, one of the things that I found over the years is one of the biggest problems why I didn't grow is, as I've alluded to at the beginning of the videos, locking down. So when I break down all the exercises that I used to love doing, one of them was the crucifix curls. Everybody loves the crucifix curls, okay? Now, for somebody who has unstable shoulders, and I will tell you now, you're answering this for yourselves going, oh, why don't you just work on stabilizing your shoulders? Well, I've had 1/4 of an inch taken off the ligament here. I've got no ligament in my AC joint. So I can work a lot of my stability, and it's very, very good. Way better than it was years ago, but it's still going to be unstable because my body's trying to destabilize all the time. So when I used to do the crucifix curls, okay, I was getting to here, and then I'd always find like it's tight in my neck when it got too heavy. So I was thinking, well, okay, when it gets too heavy, when the load gets to a point where I'm fatiguing, as does with everybody, you'll shift tension somewhere else. So I said to myself, well, are my biceps that weak, or am I that unstable? And so if I'm that unstable, my biceps have never got chance to get stronger. So what I do with that is I say, well, I know if I've locked myself down on the preacher curl, I know if I've locked myself down on like a standing curl and pushed into a bench, I've got a lot stronger. So if I fix myself down on the crucifix curl, am I going to be able to place a lot more tension in my biceps? Yes. So what I did, just set up a bench, and I look at the position that I want to be in for the curls. And then I lock down here, I push my lats into here. So now I've got tension, I've got the cable at a height where it's going to be heaviest here, and then it's going to allow me to get in this fully shortened range. So I'm coming out to here. Remember, I don't need it to be kind of like fully lengthened because my goal is to get tension on the biceps, and then I'm going to get it in its fully shortened range. So I can hold on here if I want to, lock in here, reach away, and then I'm going to come over and squeeze and lock myself in here, okay? So what then happens is the load that I'm using is able to be targeted on my bicep. When my bicep fatigues, nothing else is really going to kick in. So the weight that I can actually use on my biceps, believe it or not, went up by 5 kilos on this exercise compared to how I used to do it on the crucifix version or even the single arm crucifix. So when you look at unilateral training, the most important thing to consider is, all right, it's going to take a little bit more time to do your workout, but just remember, you're going to have potentially for most people some form of internal rotation, not issues, but differences from left and right. The other thing is, if you look at me and where my arms sit, doing a barbell curl in terms of being able to make sure I'm hitting both heads of my biceps and making sure I can do a curl with not having any internal rotation and any compromise of the actual shoulder joints or elbow joints. Why do people have so many problems with the shoulders and elbows when they do biceps curls? Well, 9 times out of 10 it's because they're trying to do a lot of bilateral training when they're not able to get in that position to optimally do a curl. So biggest development I had was taking a step back and doing unilateral training. And what you've seen today is the ability for me to look at something like the preacher, make sure I'm side on and recruiting all the way through the movement, looking at the mid-range exercise and driving into the bench to create that added stability, and then what we'll call the cozy curl. And really being able to get in that shortened range by locking into something like a bench. So when it comes to biceps training, and I'll do a triceps video so you can understand the thought process behind that as well. In the early days of training, learn how to lock in and get strong before you kind of progress to a lot of these kind of stability-based exercises by locking in and creating an external stability. Guys, if you enjoyed this video on my YouTube channel, click subscribe and keep updated with all the videos that's coming within this series.